Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. So, The Last of Us Part 2 is finally out, and with that happening, much more is actually known about the content of the game, and more general audience reviews are starting to come in. Now, of course, sorting out which are real reviews versus kinda for the memes, that's pretty darn tricky, but even with that, it is apparent that there is a great disconnect between the core fans of this franchise, at least some of them, and many reviewers. Plus then, there seems to be a significant policy problem from Sony, who have let this game away with doing things far beyond what they've censored many other games for actually doing on their storefront. Things that Nintendo, by the way, have been totally fine with. So yes, there's a lot to sift through here. If you're new, give us a sub for lots more gaming news content, and of course, give that like button a little smash to help us out with the YouTube bots. And with that said, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is talk about the general reception that won from players now that a bit more of the game has came out. Then there is also the weird stuff about Neil Druckmann, and I know that that might not seem like something that's relevant here, but unfortunately, I really do think it is, based on a lot of content that people have seen, and I think you'll understand why as you go through this video. And then also the issue of basically a bit of censorship and double standards within Sony's own practices in terms of what The Last of Us 2 has been able to get away with, but a number of other games like the most recent Devil May Cry game have not been able to get away with. So, very interesting stuff, and we'll kick it off with the reception. So, I think the number one thing, or the thing we're going to start off with, is player expectations and misleading trailers. So, the release date trailer shows the scene of Ellie having her mouth covered by somebody out of frame and asking, "What the hell are you doing here?" Now, in the trailer, it cuts to Joel saying, "You think I'd let you do this on your own?" But in the final version of things, it's actually a different character who says that because of reasons that are very apparent in the plot. And very much that's something that we'll be playing with player expectations. Now, the shots basically of Joel and Ellie interacting where he seems older, they're essentially flashbacks, and a lot of people feel like those trailers were trying to show a lot more of the relationship between those two characters taking place in The Last of Us Part 2, when in reality, those things were flashbacks, and really there's not that much of that. So this is a case of people having expectations going into the game based off the first one, and also the marketing, and then being in a situation where the game is actually not meeting that expectation. Now, this is not the first time the Naughty Dog have been deceptive in trailers, even for this franchise. In The Last of Us 1, well, they had a scene made entirely for a trailer to make people think that Ellie would have to kill Joel. And on this, Neil Druckmann said, and this is the quote, "We purposefully deceived players with certain trailers." Now, this is something that happens quite a bit in a lot of media, but I think it's just that sort of thing where you're playing with fire. I mean, take the Peter Parkers in Spider-Verse, that's one example of a little bit of that happening, but this is a very different example that I think is playing with people on a bit more of a fundamental level, which has led to that disappointment and people not really getting what they expected based on the marketing materials of the game. Now, there is another common complaint we saw where people are basically saying the game is barely focusing on the infected and that situation, and is a lot more focused on, the human stuff, the human enemies, which I mean is perfectly fine, but for some people that was not what they expected. Personally, can't say it would bother me that much. But overall, I would say that playing with expectations is dangerous, and I think that quite obviously has meant that a lot of people are calling this the video game version of The Last Jedi. And I think, what does that mean? Well, it fundamentally means just something that some core fans feel betrays their expectations, or some fans thinking that it's subversion for the sake of subversion, not really making good on it. And then, of course, the Metal Gear Solid 2 comparison is brought up quite a lot, because, I mean, yeah, people thought they were going to be playing Snake for the whole game. Nah, they got Raiden, and back then, that was a fairly major drama. So that's a few of the complaints that have went on. There are other ones that I think are extremely, just a bit of a problem, which I'll get onto, but overall, the Metacritic scores have only just opened up this morning, and you're looking at about a 3.8 based on 4,000 plus ratings. That will fluctuate a hell of a lot. There definitely are review bombs there for the sake of it, of course, but there do seem to be a lot of genuine posts there. People talking about gameplay mechanics, talking about characters, talking about the story, and a lot of what people are saying about the story seems to actually be quite close to some of the more critical reviews of the game. Those, of course, were reviews that were unscored from outlets such as Kotaku and Polygon, who generally were a bit more critical on the game. Now, what is interesting is a lot of people hating in this game culturally. There's a bunch of trans and gay jokes from the channers, which literally don't bear any weight here, that are like, I mean, number one, like not actually true for the character of Abby, and I think they're a manifestation of people not being happy. I would say, though, that the channers were not really the audience of The Last of Us Part 1. So I think they're jumping on this for some banter, right? Some memes. It's what they do. But I don't think they're the core audience of these games. And I think that really a lot of that angle is completely pointless and just a load of BS. And I think we need to be really careful here that those sort of, I guess, made up criticisms that are mostly jokes, we need to be careful that those don't actually mask out the genuine criticisms about the plot and the character motivations and the pacing, because it seems like the people who really like The Last of Us Part 1 and were excited about going into this game, it seems like a lot of those people are not particularly thrilled at characterizations, the plot line, things like that. You know, the actual criticisms of the game as is presented. But fundamentally, you're in a position where this is a game that a lot of people put a lot of weight into, right, in terms of the more official reviews that came out. And yes, there's then masses of memes referencing some of the more, funny scenes. There's one we'll get into in a bit in a negative light. And it's a situation where The Last of Us 2 had all the eyeballs in the gaming world on it, and it's being made fun of. And in a lot of cases, and we'll get onto this with the Neil Druckmann's seemingly rather insane ego situation, that, I mean, some of that is kind of warranted. It's kind of funny. Now, as for the actual user reviews and the issues that people seem to be experiencing, well, gameplay that is too similar to The Last of Us Part 1, right? 7-year gap, an entire generation between them, and it doesn't feel like that much development has actually happened in terms of bringing the formula forward and doing more things. Now, people are saying the game looks gorgeous, it's animated gorgeously, and that definitely seems to be the case. But most people are saying that the writing is where they're struggling with it, that it's an insult to The Last of Us, and that it doesn't resonate with people, that it's basically a complete, just boilerplate revenge story that doesn't have much payoff. I mean, for one quote, somebody said, it seems like the writers simply have no idea how to write properly, not just for shock value. It's Game of Thrones Season 8 all over again. There's a lot of people thinking that. There's a lot of people saying that violence makes violence, right? That the revenge and the cycle of violence is really the core theme of this story, but that there's never a moral choice for the player. So what's going to happen there, right? It's not really doing anything interesting with it. It's basically just sticking your face in it and saying, hey, look at this. This is really bad. Whereas perhaps a game that was giving you choice in your actions would fare better there. I mean, if you think about, say, the trolley problem, right? Where, it's the idea of there's a train going down the tracks, you can divert the train. So the train is going down the tracks, it's going to hit and kill 5 people. You could divert the train onto another track where it would only kill 1 person. That's the trolley problem. A lot of this seems to come down to, this is like a game trying to talk about the trolley problem to you, but it's just in a straight line, right? So you gotta kill the 5 people no matter what happens, and the game is just saying, hey, look at this, it's bad. And then if I think about another linear game, right, like say the white phosphorus scene in Spec Ops: The Line, well, you got a situation there where your character, that makes sense, right, as a horrible thing that happens in a linear game that the game is showing you, because your character is doing what they think is kind of right there, and the outcome is something that is unexpected, and the entire point is about the unexpected consequences of actions and using weaponry such as white phosphorus in an area that could be rather crowded with, civilians, as an example, in that particular game. Whereas with The Last of Us 2, it's kind of less really going in that way. So that seems to be one of the angles of criticism. Now, the first game is one that was praised for its story and the heart and its characters, and it basically seems like the second one has failed in those regards for many of the core fans of the first game. And there is this big discrepancy between critic and user reviews. I think that's indicative of the schism between those two audiences. Now, I would recommend watching Alana Pierce's video on the 10 out of 10 IGN reviews, and basically what she's saying there is, look, it's not really a situation of paid off reviews or things like that. She basically sort of was like, look, I think some of these reviews, it's these reviewers writing more from a high art perspective, writing to sort of impress their Twitter followers, and maybe not being focused on their core audience, right, and who the review is actually for. And I've got to say, I would definitely agree with Alana on that, and I think you should give that video a watch after this one. There's a collectible card that you can actually find, right, in the game, and the character on this card is a fictional one called Dr. Uckman. And basically the character looks like Neil Druckmann, and Neil Druckmann has since updated his Twitter bio, his personal, his profile picture, to be Dr. Uckman from this card in the game. So that literally is a self-insert cameo of Neil Druckmann. But if you actually look at the statistics of Dr. Uckman on this card, it claims that he's got 100% brain, 60% brawn, and is a villain. And you're like, right, okay, there's just a lot of ego things going on here that seem really bizarre. And then also, if you look at the Dr. Uckman trading card, what you see is that his faction is the New Dogs. Now, if you know anything about what's said to have been going on at Naughty Dog, well, basically, Amy Hennig and the old way that studio was going isn't really a thing anymore. Amy Hennig, of course, left the company during Uncharted 4, so, we had that Uncharted movie writer kind of talk about that as well. And, you've got him saying the New Dogs, which is kind of saying, the new school, right? Leader of the new school of Naughty Dog, which once again just does reinforce that ego angle. And I mean, man, it certainly doesn't seem like the type of guy I'd want to work for. I can certainly say that. So basically the situation here is that Druckmann seems to be writing this game for himself, for the sorts of people who are backing him up on Twitter, instead of, writing it purely for the audience or trying to get a mixture of both. It feels very performative, very edgy for the sake of it, and it's claiming to have this message about cycles of violence and revenge that a lot of people are not really feeling like they're actually getting from the game. Now, it's also alleged, right? I say, that Druckmann was the reason why Amy Hennig left the company, and it was over a myriad of disagreements. Now, for what it's worth, a writer who was on the Uncharted movie called Joe Carnahan called Neil, quote, a jerk-off and, quote, hitchhiker who stole credit for Uncharted 4 from Amy. That's Amy Hennig. Now, this is just what this guy said. It is unsubstantiated, but I will say that it does fit a narrative that people are trying to push, and that sort of situation, right, where the shoe fits. So whether that is true or not, it certainly is a perspective that I think will be spreading. So that's the Druckmann angle, right? You kind of look at the guy at the top and you think, well, has that actually trickled down to the rest of the game and maybe betrayed the excellent quality of work that was done by likely the vast majority of the Naughty Dog workforce? Then finally, there's the angle of a bit of weird censorship going on, right? Where basically anime titties aren't okay, but if it's a PS Boys game titties, then it's okay. I know it sounds like a weird thing for me to say, but there's a bit of a double standard here. It's something we've not really covered in the channel that much, but essentially, right, DMCA5, it had this bit of censorship where a crack of the ass was covered by a very, very funny looking lens flare, and it was only in the PS4. Omega Labyrinth Z was blocked from release outside of Japan, despite P-Cube getting the all clear from the age rating bodies. There's then the whole Senran Kagura affair, where Burst Renewal was delayed to remove intimacy mode in the West. Senran Kagura 7 was even impossible to release due to platform holder policy changes. And I mean, look, it's Senran Kagura, come on, it is a bit wild sometimes, isn't it? But there is just this situation where there seems to be a very different standard that Sony are holding these Japanese developers to when it comes to, sexualized content in their games. Whereas then you look at The Last of Us Part 2 and you've got this pretty uncomfortable sort of out of nowhere sex scene that's really gratuitous, right? That's a lot more gratuitous than what a lot of these games are doing. And you're kind of like, well, Sony, why are you not applying your stuff in an even way here? And then the very same day that all this stuff came out for The Last of Us Part 2, P-Cube had to announce that the visual novel, I think Okana is how it's called, I forget, Okana basically had to remove 3 scenes and had to change 4 just on the PS4, right? But the funny thing is, the Switch version of that game is going to be fine and unchanged. So, it's quite funny, Sony struggling with this VN, but Nintendo, who are the far more, children-oriented company, being like, no, as long as this game is on our store and it's clearly marked as 18 plus and everything's above board, then fire away, put your 18 plus content on our store. It's just kind of funny seeing Sony versus Nintendo and what they're kind of okay with here. So, there you go. That is a situation for The Last of Us Part 2. Personally, after this video is recorded and I finish up the rest of my day's work, I'm going to be going home to play it, because I want to be pretty clear here. The Last of Us Part 1 was a game that I absolutely loved. Uncharted 4 was a game that I absolutely loved. And by all accounts, Neil Druckmann was a pretty darn major dude on both games. So for me, I'm kind of interested in, has it went wrong? Are the reviews right? Are they wrong? What's going on? I want to actually go in there and get my first-hand perspective, and I'll probably give you a video update. Honestly, Obviously, there's a good chance it'll be late after, it'll probably be put out by the time that people don't really give a darn anymore. But I wouldn't do it because I feel like it's the only, it's only right for me to do after talking about The Last of Us Part 2. And especially because I know there's going to be a lot of work in that game that will be genuinely fantastic, because the majority of people working at Naughty Dog will have done a great job. It's just that it seems like the guy who had ultimate power over the script, kind of exerted that power. That's what it seems to be. I suppose we'll just have to see what it actually is like when you really get down to it. That's basically your situation. You got meta bombing going on. You've got the, I now say traditional because I think it is a thing now pretty much, a situation of audiences and critics coming at things from different perspectives and having very, very different reviews and opinions. Just an interesting situation. I would love to know, though, have you played this game? What do you think about it, right? After the 4-hour mark, where are you thinking about some of the moves that happened there? Do let me know. I'm genuinely curious. It's a very interesting situation, both, just as somebody who likes games and also just culturally, right, in the discourse and what's going on. So let me know. Thank you very much for watching this video. Of course, there's lots of other content on the channel. If you would like more of a positive, feel-good story that's nice, that's a developer just doing well by their game, check out yesterday's video on Sea of Thieves. It's some really nice stuff. So give that a look. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.